Hey everyone, this is Mike
And I'm Jose.
So today we're going to be talking about the processes of buying a home from start to finish. And the first step is
finding the right agent.
Find the right agent.
When you're looking for the right agent, you'll want to make sure that you go online,
check the reviews.
You Google search them, you check the reviews. Usually they have a profile on Zillow or realtor.com.
Yep.
You can see previous homes they sold. You can see what comments or reviews previous buyers have said about them. And that way it kind of gives you more of an idea who you're working with going into it. And of course, getting a personal referral from a friend or family member is always going to trump you just finding a random agent somewhere on the internet.
Second step, that agent will probably direct you into working with getting a pre-approval.
Yeah, and of course, guys, let's be honest, no one's going to start working with you or put you in their car, start showing you homes, or, unless they know what you're qualified to purchase. So even if you don't qualify quite for where you want to be in the price home that you want, at least that mortgage broker can tell you, hey, if you just fix this and you pay this off, we can kind of bump you up to the price range you want to be at. That way you know what you have to work towards to get to that pre-approval process. Also, it's a good idea to use a local mortgage broker or somebody that your realtor refers to you, because in most cases that local mortgage broker is going to be more entwined with the community, and they're probably going to have more commitment or a service that they have to provide that agent. So if that agent trusts that mortgage broker and they work well together, why not have them carry your loan?
And the next part's the fun part.
Yeah, looking at houses.
Yeah.
So typically, once you get that golden ticket, which is a pre-approval letter from a bank telling you that they're going to give you a certain amount of money, then your realtor will show you properties that are in that price point, and then you can review those properties, look at pictures, and determine which are your favorites, and then that agent will go out and show you those particular homes so you can look at them and preview them with your family.
Yeah. So make sure you spend a lot of good time looking at everything in those houses, and of course you can go back to your favorite ones.
Now here's a big mistake a lot of buyers make, and it's usually, I always refer everything to the real estate world as dating, because it's like that in a lot of ways, but you might find the perfect house, it checks off not all your boxes, but say 9 out of 10. And it's a great opportunity, a great price. You should submit an offer, except you're kind of having that buyer's remorse and you're thinking, you know what? I just want to hold out because maybe something better might come along. Right? Even though the perfect person's sitting right in front of you and it might be a perfect match and you live the rest of your lives together, you're just waiting for somebody or something better to come along. Well, in this case, if you find a house and it checks off, in my opinion, if it checks off at least 7 out of 10 boxes, you should take serious consideration in submitting an offer, because waiting around for the perfect home may never happen and you may lose a few great houses in the process.
Yep. So, all right, next step, you find a house you like.
Yeah, so once you find a house that you like, then you're gonna have to take some serious steps into negotiating an offer that would be acceptable or advantageous or equitable to both you and the seller. So that's where an experienced agent that knows how to negotiate is gonna really come in handy, because they're gonna be your representative in getting you the best price and terms.
Yep. And there's a bunch of things other than price in the real estate sales agreement. And a good agent will know how to leverage it and do well. I mean, there's the home warranty, there's if they're going to help with closing costs, and a bunch of other stuff. So that's where having a good agent comes in really handy. And a good agent will also be able to check out all the other houses that have sold similar to that in the market and use that to negotiate a better deal for you in most cases.
Their market knowledge is going to come through. So if they notice that 2 other homes in the neighborhood recently sold for $230 a square foot, and this particular is asking $245, they could come in with that information and push to get you the best deal at the price and terms that you're looking for. So they might be armed with information that you may not be privy to. So even though you think you're smart enough and competent enough to negotiate your own deal, the reason you bring an agent is because chances are they do this every day and they're probably going to do better than you can, even when it comes to negotiating prices and terms for new home construction or for sale by owners or properties that are listed by other agents. Having your own representation is going to go a long way.
Yeah. And then after that, what would be, I guess we would go to
full loan approval.
Yeah.
So usually
within 5 days, you have to send in.
Usually the seller will say to the buyer, yes, I'll accept your offer, but after I accept your offer, you usually have about 5 days to get the lender all the paperwork and documentation that they need to start to process your loan, so we can make our closing date on a time that we've situated on the contract. Now, if the buyer's diddly-dallying or just fumbling around or not providing all the documentation required by the lender cannot process your loan and get it closed in time. So if the seller does call the lender and say, lender, did you receive full loan application? And the lender says, no, I'm still waiting on the buyer. The seller then then, based on our Florida contract, the seller then has a right to terminate the contract and put their property back active on the market because you're not adhering to the terms.
And most likely be able to keep the deposit as well, keep the earnest. So be careful, everything after you have the executed agreement, if everything signed, if you don't do as said in the contract on the date, you could be in breach, including sending in the escrow money.
Correct.
So you have to make sure that you follow it. I've had some buyers who just don't think that the dates are important, and I'm like,
Yep.
do you understand that you have to have it by this date? If not, your money's at risk.
And let's talk about this. So you submitted an escrow deposit, you make full loan application, and then you have to know when you're going to close the deal or close the contract. Now, usually your buyer's agent will negotiate this with the listing agent to determine when is a comfortable closing date for all parties. Now, a big mistake that's made in the industry is they determine, okay, you're getting a conventional loan. Typically, a mortgage lender needs 25 or 30 days to close a conventional loan. Let's close in 30 days. But the thing is, there's contingencies in the contract that say if the buyer cannot obtain a loan within 30 days, then the buyer has the right to cancel the contract and get their escrow deposit back. Only problem is, we don't want the buyer having until the day of closing to let the seller know they couldn't qualify for financing and cancel the day before the day of closing, when the seller already has all their items packed in a truck ready to move the next day, and they're like, sorry, the contract said if we didn't obtain financing, we could cancel, and you gave us 30 days for that. So I always have our agents, I always have them give a little extra time for closing, or a little more time for closing than is actually allowed in the financing contingency.
All right, so the first contingency is typically in most agreements would be the next thing is usually anywhere from 7 to 15 days for a home inspection contingency. So
yeah, so if you're a buyer, you want to make sure that the property you're purchasing is exactly as advertised. Now, the only way you know that for sure is if you hire a professional inspector to go through the property and what we call a building inspection. So they'll inspect the house itself to make sure that integrity and structure and the interior are safe and without any flaws or defects. So some of the most common things that we see in a home inspection that gets kicked back are, there's broken tiles on the floor, or the hot water of the upstairs bathroom doesn't turn hot, or the AC coils need to be replaced, or there could be we also get another inspection on top of the building inspection, which is a WDO inspection, to determine if there's any termites or wood rot anywhere in the home. I'd like to know that before I finalize my purchase. And in most cases, you have an inspection contingency that gives the buyer, say, 10 days to go in and do whatever inspections they need. But if for some reason they find something in that inspection report within the 10 days that they don't like, they either have the right to cancel or renegotiate. So also remember, guys, if you did find some items that needed to be repaired, either you ask them to be repaired by a licensed contractor so you know the work is being done at a certain quality, or you ask for a credit. So then at closing, the seller can give you a credit from their proceeds, and then you, the buyer, can use those funds to replace or fix those items at the way that you want them.
That's definitely the better way to do it, because if not, then you have to do another inspection to make sure that the repairs were done correctly, and that could cause more issues for everyone involved. So I highly recommend, unless the lender requires that something gets fixed, like for example, the roof needs to be fixed, that you just get a concession.
Yep. And next on this would
So a couple things that the lender usually requires, and it's a survey and an appraisal.
So if you're getting financing, you have to get a survey, and that's when a surveyor comes out to the property. They've got those tripods with the little camera things on them. You see them sometimes on the road. What they're doing is they're actually measuring the boundaries of your property, and they're drawing out a map that basically says, this is the land you own, these are the lengths of the front, the back, the sides, these are the setbacks set forth by the county, and this is the footprint of your house and any permitted structures on said property. Now, the survey is needed by the lender because if they're giving you money to borrow in order to buy a piece of property, if they ever did need to foreclose and take that property back, they need to make sure that you have a clean parcel and there's no other neighbors that are encroaching on your land.
So, and there's two things after you get the agreement, other than sending in the earnest money, that you could possibly get back. There's two expenses that you'll never get back if you don't go forward with it, and that's the one thing was the home inspection.
Home inspection.
And then the other thing was the appraisal.
Which is actually our next thing.
Yeah.
If you get an appraisal, it has to be done if you get financing, because that lender that's giving you the money that you borrow to purchase a property, they don't want to give you more money than the property itself is worth.
Yeah.
So they send a licensed appraiser that's had years and years and years of studying on how to do their craft, and it's considered an art form. But what they do is they go out to the property, and using all their knowledge and background and skills, they'll determine the house is worth this. And then that report is given to the lender, and the lender will say, okay, we feel comfortable giving them $300,000 based on the professional opinion of that appraiser. Buyer, here's the money. Now, if that appraisal doesn't come in at the value that you had purchased the home for, what your agent could have done up front was add a separate contingency to the offer. It's called an appraisal contingency that says that, hey, seller, even though you're asking us for this price and we're agreeing to pay it, me and my buyer tend to think that you might be a little overpriced, and just to protect us, in case it doesn't, is an appraisal contingency that says the home has to appraise for $300K, and if it doesn't, my buyer can get their escrow deposit back and we can walk away from the deal.
It's not one that most listing agents tend to like right now, so it just depends on how the market is. It could put you at a disadvantage if you have an appraisal contingency when you're putting an offer in the house. So some of realtors may not recommend doing it, especially if they do think that the market value is where it's at. But the only way to protect yourself is to have that appraisal contingency. So if you move forward and let's say it appraises $5,000 less, you may have to come out of pocket $5,000 to make it all work, and it's not going to be covered by the loan contingency if the appraisal is too high. The appraisal contingency is extremely biased to the buyer, meaning if it came in $100 less, you can just cancel. The seller doesn't even have the option to say, okay, well, I'll just drop it $100. You literally can cancel and get your money back. Next thing would be a title company.
Title company, the next thing they do is an estoppel. So what the title company has to do is make sure before the buyer purchases the home and the seller hands the property over to the buyer, they first need to make sure that the seller has paid off any outside obligations prior to closing. So for instance, an estoppel has to do with HOA. So if I live in an HOA, an estoppel letter goes to the HOA attorney that says, hey, I have a buyer purchasing this property. Are there outstanding fines, judgments, liens, or violations that homeowner's been hit with that hasn't paid off? And usually the HOA attorney will say, no, they're paid up to date, there's no violations, there's no fines, clean and clear. And then the title company is able to close the transaction. But if they do find violations or fines that haven't been paid to the HOA, these fees will have to be charged to the seller at closing to convey clear title to the buyer at the time of closing.
So there's all title work done behind the scenes. Usually buyers don't even have to worry about some of this stuff. And when you do have a good professional working with you, a lot of this stuff goes really smoothly. So just keep that in mind. If you have a good lender and a good realtor, this is all pretty smooth stuff. During this whole time, you're probably also talking to your lender. Your lender's probably going to be asking for W-2s, for
bank statements, tax
all
returns,
this.
the whole thing.
Yeah, keep a separate file for everything that they ask, because they may ask for it 2 or 3 times. They have a tendency to do that.
But they can't give you a loan commitment until they receive all the documentation and they've processed everything and sent everything to underwriting.
Yeah.
Underwriting is usually like the bouncer at the club that's basically saying, okay, I know the guy at the front said you could come in, but I'm the last line of defense. And I say you can't come in because I noticed something weird on your tax return that didn't jive well with me. Or I noticed some of your verification of employment said you only work 35 hours a week and not the 40 that you said you worked. So that does affect your income. So we're gonna have to go back and look at that before I release the money to you.
Yeah.
So usually the underwriter is the last person you have to get through before the bank is gonna give you a commitment letter that says we're committed to giving this individual the money that we promised them when we gave them that pre-approval up front.
And you want to get that commitment letter within the time period, usually 30 days.
Within the financing contingency.
Within the financing, because the contingency could be 25 days, could be 30, could be 35. You want to get that. And a lot of times the underwriters may do a conditional approval where it's like, oh, well, we approved it, but we still need the insurance, for example, to be bind, which is then probably another one thing that we have to do.
This is usually, guys, this is in our industry, this is usually one of the last things that's done. I feel that it should be one of the things that are done up front, where the buyer will contact a local homeowner's insurance broker. And they say, hey, I'm buying the property at 123 Banana Street, and I want to know how much it's going to be to bind homeowner's insurance to protect the structure. And usually that broker will go online, shop it around, and they'll say, hey, I found this company. They say that they'd be willing to do it. It's going to cost you $4,500 for the year, and they said everything's good to go. Now, in most cases, a homeowner's insurance is going to ask for a couple things. Now, they're not usually going to ask for your inspection report, but they will want something else. It's called a 4-point inspection. Now, they can't give you insurance until they determine that your home passes a 4-point inspection, which means that depending on the age of your home, has there been an update to the roof, the plumbing, the electrical, and HVAC system? They need to make sure it's all in working order and it's in compliance with county code. The next thing they want to do, in Florida especially, is called a wind mitigation. Now, wind mitigation is when the home inspector that's doing your regular building inspection, he can create these reports for you as well. And he's going to say, yes, I did a wind mitigation, and according to the local code and standards, the roof is held down according to the way that the local government wants it held down. In case there's a heavy storm with winds or hurricane or tornado, there's it's tied down, it's strapped down, and it's used with proper nails and so on and so forth. And if the insurance company sees that information, then they'll write you a homeowner's insurance policy, and then that homeowner's insurance policy has to be bound and a copy delivered to the lender so they can provide you the funding at closing.
Yep. So while we have it here on one of the last steps, it really should be started. Binding should be one of the last steps, but it should be probably started right after you have the agreement executed before the home inspection, because if you talk to the insurance agents, they may say, oh, you need a 4-point inspection or a wind mitigation inspection, and you can have your home inspector add that while they're there, and it'll save you a little bit of money.
Or they might say, oh yeah, you're gonna need a flood policy. Like, why? Well, you're in a 100 floodplain zone, and because of that, you're gonna have to purchase a separate policy that's $1,500 on top of the $4,500 that it costs to protect the structure. And that $1,500 may put you out of the availability to purchase, because what they do is the lender will determine how much can you afford every month on top of your normal bills. It's called debt to income ratio.
Yeah.
So based on your normal bills you have to pay every month, can you afford the extra weight of paying for a home? And they say, yes, you can. But all of a sudden, now you have to pay $4,500 for homeowner's insurance and an extra $1,500 binder for flood insurance. The lender might say, well, now that you have to pay this, you can't afford the mortgage that we gave you because the insurance is too expensive. And then now all of a sudden, we're supposed to close next week and the deal's dead.
And you lose your earnest.
And that's all because you waited for the last minute to bind your homeowner's insurance. So I'd recommend you do this up front.
And then you're within the 10 days to, if it's within the home inspection period, which is typically 10 days, you can cancel everything, get your earnest money back if the insurance is too high. Flood insurance could be a lot more than $1,500 too, depending on where you are.
Correct.
I've seen them close to $10,000 a year in some areas.
So in the Florida FAR contract, the as-is contract that we use here in Florida, there is a flood contingency written into the contract that says if within 20 days of executing the contract, the buyer finds out the home is in a flood zone, they can actually cancel the contract. And if you're concerned because the home is too old, say the home was built in 1920 or 1940, you can actually use a separate contingency and add it to your contract. It's a homeowner's insurance contingency that says if we can't find affordable homeowner's insurance, we also have the right to cancel the contract.
Lots of contingencies that a lot of realtors probably don't even know about if they're not experienced in the industry. So a couple final steps before we get the key to the house. One of the last ones, which some realtors don't do, which blows my mind, is doing a final walkthrough, typically the day of closing.
Yep.
So why is that important?
So first of all, you want to do it the day of or the morning, the day before the morning of closing. And that's just to ensure the seller has removed all their belongings. They're out of the house. So now you could come through an empty home and survey it with your eyes to make sure, one, is the home damaged or has anything happened to it since we placed our contract? An example was when the homeowners moved everything out underneath the family rug in the middle of the living room. When they took that away, they noticed there was a large stain on the carpet. And they didn't see that before when they had come through the home because all their stuff was there. So because of that, they had to get a credit at closing for new carpet. But you want to make sure that, okay, is everything clean? Is everything in place? Is there any damage to the house? Did they take something they weren't supposed to take?
Yeah.
But if everything looks good, then you can proceed to closing, sign all the documentation, because once you sign that closing paperwork, the house is now done, it's yours, there's no going back. So that's why a final walkthrough determines, buyer, are you okay with the home? You saw everything you needed to see? Great. let's sign on the dotted line.
And that's it. Then you get to go and enjoy your new house.
Yeah, so I know we summed everything up here, but just so you guys understand all the moving parts that go along with a home purchase, this whole thing from beginning to end, what we just mentioned, will typically take 25 to 30 days to get it all wrapped up with a bow and ready for everybody to proceed to the closing table. So what we just mentioned, typically will take a month on average to get done.
It's all, and of course, if you have professionals working with you, especially a good realtor, they'll hold your hand all the way through, step by step. Having a good lender and a good agent, and also ensuring the home inspector is well reviewed. That's your team for buying probably the most important or most expensive investment of your life, which is your home.
Yeah, and that's why I always tell people, don't go it alone. There's too many variables, there's too many things that could go wrong. It's definitely worth having a professional that does this every day of their life to kind of be out here taking care of all this for you and looking out for you. That way you just didn't forget an essential step that could cost you tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it could really, if you do something wrong or have something wrong in that agreement, it can definitely cost you some money. So that's it.
There you have it.
A lot longer than I thought it was going to be,
Yeah.
but hey, I think it's good. I think it has every single step so that people have an expectation of what to expect on their home purchase. So, well, thank you all for watching.
Yep, we'll see you next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.